recording.
Okay, great. My name's Trisha Coates, and the piece that you see behind me is titled Love Letter to My River. The overall theme of my works in general have to do with the state of memory being in flux and not something that's concrete or fixed. Memory doesn't really act like a filing cabinet where you can go pick out a memory exactly as you put it in. When you remember something, it's actually a protein that's stored in your brain that gets put into a state of malleability or a state where it's susceptible to change. Right? So every time you remember something, it's actually just the last version of the time that you remembered it. And so in that spirit, that's sort of the spirit in which I create my work. So it's all ceramic on panel. I hand make and render specific objects. I make molds and replicate certain objects. I also take things from life and dip them into slip and burn them out so that the actual objects burn away, and then its memory is kind of kept in clay from there on out. And then I collage everything together kind of to the final piece. So this piece here was inspired by my son River, who in 2019 started as my daughter Magnolia. And so it's sort of just this documentation of the big change in our family that happened when he came out as trans. So there's a lot of imagery that's kind of specific to our family and to my son. The glass that runs sort of the length of the piece is the aerial view of the Lamprey River in New Hampshire, which is where we were living when I had my son at the time, 14 years ago now. And so there's a lot of, as you can imagine, there's some loss, there's some growth, there's some new beginnings. That's sort of all kind of embedded within that work there. I also pull a lot of specific imagery from still life and memento mori. So a lot of times you'll see bones and fruit and flowers, sort of as that nod to ephemerality and the unfixedness of things of this world. So. Yeah, that's a great question because so much of what's embedded in here is actual fragments from my place of living and place of being. I walk around and collect cicada husks from my neighborhood over the summertime. I collect plant fragments. I do drawings of the flowers that I draw. So I feel like I'm pretty in tune in the space where I'm living at the time. I'm from New Hampshire originally. I'm an East Coast kid and I've been here for almost 9 years, I think, at this point. And I lived here in high school and 1 year in college. So I feel tied to the Midwest, kind of in my history and in my roots, and then again, kind of currently today. Yeah. Oh, the state. Oh my goodness. You got to be scrappy and vibrant. And yeah, I love how connected our art community is. I'm living down in Wichita right now, and it's a really vibrant arts community down there. We are all, a lot of us know each other. We're really connected and close and supportive of each other too, which I don't know if you get everywhere. There's not a sense, I don't think, of competitiveness in Wichita, and we're, our art community, which I think is a really special thing.
So this piece is in a room that's titled Pushing Materiality.
Yeah, the physical work alone, I love working large scale. This is sort of in the pushing the edge of the large scale. I think the biggest piece I've made is an 8 foot by 10 foot. And to be able to confront the material with your body instead of just tactilely or with your eyes, I think is a really different way to approach ceramics. And a lot of artists are doing that, but I think that's one of the things that I enjoy about working in this way. I always explain that what I do is painting with ceramics. I think there's this real intersection of painting with the materiality that comes with ceramics and clay, and that history and preservation and that history of touch and tactility too, I think is really important. But yeah, working the scale certainly comes with a physicality for sure that I both love and hate all at the same time. I love it when it's up on the wall. I do not love having to create it and move it and having to install it. But, yeah. Yeah, let me pick out a few things. Let let's see. Well, I can kind of speak towards the physicality and the material of some of the stuff that's personal to the story here. So I've got undergarments, right? Maybe my son would be horrified for me to talk about. So maybe this gets edited out. I don't know. I'll tell you guys here. But an old sports bra that was mine, that got passed down. That's just no longer like in the articles of clothing that he wears now. Over here are his batting gloves from softball. He's really, really talented at softball, and it's the first batting gloves that he ever hit his first home run in. And I was conflicted about putting this in there because it's a piece to my son and to say that really, it's a love letter to my river. Like, even though we're dealing with kind of loss and, saying goodbye to someone that we knew for 13 and a half years, like, there are moments that I think about in this piece of that new green growth pushing through and blossoming through to just suggest that there's a new story happening here. It's not entirely about loss. I don't want to think of it as like a depressing piece, that there are elements that are poking through. In some of these little encapsulated glass areas of written letters, don't be afraid, and I love you, and what else? Yeah, you can, if you look hard, you can find cicada husks that are in there. I do make molds, so there's some molds of the cicadas down there from our neighborhood. Yeah.
Have you given them other ways to interpret it? Or?
I hope so, and I think that's where some of the imagery of the still life comes in. This, to me, is a little more narrative and linearly than I typically work. You've got the entry point of the river and that thread of black glass that kind of moves you from left to right through the piece. And kind of along the way, we've got, the pear still life up here. We've got the flowers that hopefully the viewer can kind of connect to this idea of a still life or ephemerality. I hope there's entry points and that aren't so specific, but since I'm here and tell you that. Yeah, undertones. Strawberries, I have wonderful memories of he and I just going out and picking strawberries, both in New Hampshire and down in Wichita. So some things that are tied to really specific personal things in my life, and hopefully through the specificity of those, they can kind of unlock and they become the universal, hopefully. Yeah.
Anything else?